Thank you so much, Lydia, for inviting me to come and do this Real Kiwi talk. I really appreciate the opportunity. I woke up this morning, I was just saying to some friends of ours, I woke up this morning with complete clarity about what I wanted to talk about. Went for a run, came back, completely lost what it was that I wanted to say. But many of you know what a GP does. You've encountered GPs, you know some of what we do. It is a complex job. There's not a day that goes by when I'm not intellectually challenged, emotionally wrung out, spiritually, physically, just beyond myself. We need a team of people around us. We can't work by ourselves. So thank you to all the other medical health professionals, the social workers, and in fact, every family member who cares for other family members. We could not do it without you. So thank you, heartfelt thanks. I've been in medicine now for 25 years. For the last 15, I've worked with patients who have got complex health needs. I've worked in a deprived community. I've also worked in some very affluent communities, but the last 15 years have been predominantly with the poor. As already stated, I'm a vicar's wife as well. I'm part of a church community. I'm a mother of 3. I'm also a sister of an addict. She's been an addict for 25 years. I have to say, Emily's 15 years sounded like heaven to me. My sister's still in the grips of the most awful life. And that has shaped me. It's shaped who I am. It's shaped how I've prayed. I know how to pray. I pray. And there are treasure chests of prayers in heaven for my sister when she's ready. I've also been a missionary in Afghanistan. We were there in 2000, 2001, and I worked under the Taliban. I also, so we worked under the Taliban. We evacuated on September the 12th. That was quite a challenging time. And I've also been brought up around the world. So I've got broad life experience and world experience. It was a complete joy at the age of 17 to be called into medicine. God made it very, very clear. I wasn't really a Christian, but I did ask him, and he told me to do medicine. And I went off to university, and at university I encountered the Holy Spirit and was filled with the Holy Spirit and completely transformed. And I suppose that's really where my journey with God started, my partnership started. It is an absolute wonder to study the body and to find the character of God in every cell, every atom of our body. You know, it speaks of his goodness. It speaks of how he works. We cannot escape the imprint of God on our lives. The other thing that really fascinates me is that we are all made in the image of God. And I have an in-depth knowledge of people's bodies, and it amazes me. We are made in the image of God, the most broken of bodies, and yet we are made in the image of God. So it is a complete privilege to be a doctor. But it's also costly. It's very, very costly. You know, we live in a broken world. We live with lives that have been destroyed, lives that, where awful things have happened. And it doesn't take long in medicine to come to the end of yourself, to hear enough stories where you just get beyond yourself. You don't have what it is to offer in terms of the needs of this world. You know, our bodies are in a constant state of decay and destruction. And the stories we hear, a young father having to say goodbye to his wife and to his young children because he's dying and there's nothing we can do for him. The heartbreak of holding that family as there's nothing that can be done. Encountering ambiguous situations, a teenager who's pregnant. It's heartbreaking. It's not black and white. It's not just keep the baby. There is a cost to it all. Then to find out that she has been abused from a young age. And, it's just breaking to examine a child's body after they've been sexually abused. It's awful. It is awful. It keeps me awake at night. It's horrible. I think at the same time, we hear amazing stories as well. It is very, very easy to be a Christian as a doctor. It's a kind, compassionate job. We're asked to talk to people, to be nice to people. It's easy. But the thing is, we're called to more than that. Jesus only gave us one prayer, and that prayer was the Lord's Prayer. And he says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We are called to encounter heaven. We are called to help others encounter heaven, help others to encounter the miraculous through us. And I think that has really been my story, that as my heart has been broken, it has been replaced by God's heart and his compassion and his care. Holding God's heart in your heart is not something I do day in, moment by moment, but it is something that hugely impacts me, and it does underpin my medical practice. I was talking to a prostitute who's the same age as me. She looks about 20 years older. She's with the most nasty person in our area. And she was heartbroken, and something awful had happened, and she'd self-discharged from hospital. And I said to her, do you know about Mary Magdalene? And she's like, no. And by this stage, we were walking out to the waiting room. I said, oh my goodness, I've got to tell you about Mary Magdalene. So I told her of Mary Magdalene, and she was like, well, I won't repeat her exact words, but she's like, bloody hell. She was like, really? What? He looked at someone like me? She yanked me over to the other side of the room and said, tell me more about her. And I then went on to tell her and to talk to her about the window at our church that has a picture of Mary Magdalene. She's not actually made it into church, but I know she's circling around the church. And when awful things happen, she comes and she sits outside that window. Likewise, a lady who horribly, horribly abused from a young age. Her brother had abused her from the age of 8. She got married, had children, and her abuser said, I will abuse your daughter unless you carry on. So she ended up in this very confused, conflicted relationship for a long time. He eventually died. I hadn't got to know her a good few years before he died. And during that time, I'd sort of held her in her awful, complex medical health needs. But we had slowly spoken, and she came in so excited. I've got to tell the story. I know I'm over time, but she came in, and she was hugely impacted by the Easter weekend, and she was so excited, and she wanted to thank me. 600 members of her family had met for a hui, and they had lived out the Easter story. This is a completely unchurched family, but they'd lived out the Easter story. There'd been an opportunity for her to share her story on Good Friday night. 15 other members of the family shared their stories of being abused. One of the abusers got up and apologized. No fingers were pointed, but 600 members of the family lay on the floor and wept for what was lost in their family. Easter Saturday, they were all just completely spaced out, she said. And then she said, on Easter Sunday, it was like Christ has risen. She said, I'm not a churchgoer. She said, I know you are, but this is what happened. And she said it was amazing, absolutely amazing. The younger members of the family have now since got up and they've come to her, and she's become an auntie to them all.